Hello YouTube, and welcome back to part 2 of the Einhell cordless 36 volt battery operated table saw. So if you haven't already, part number 1 up there is where we do the unboxing of the cheapest cordless 36 volt job site tabletop look-see around of the features. Now the only thing I forgot to show you feature wise is the saw comes with 2 extraction points for dust extraction. So unlike some of the others, more expensive, looking at DeWalt's for example, they only have the extractor point at the back at the bottom. This one has one at the top there. Whoop. There we go. You can remove the cap and then you can hook up a little white piece on the back, which is actually available directly from Einhell with a bit of hose. So you can have both at the top and at the bottom dust extraction, which in this price point is actually quite a neat feature. So all you have to do for that is remove the little screw that's on top of here. There we go. It's just a little Phillips head screw. Take the cap off. There you go. And then it comes with a round feature where you can plug a vacuum cleaner onto, or as you said, a hose extension, so you can feed it to the main extractor point at the back of the saw. So that's what it looks like. So anyway, let's get straight back into it. So that was a little bit that we forgot in the previous video. Go and check it out. Up there it was somewhere. Let's go straight into this particular video. So in this video we're going to look at how to set the saw up. So straight out of the box with a lot of these saws, this is not the only one, even more expensive units that you can buy, they need some adjusting because they not always come perfectly usable out of the box straight from the factory. I mean, these guys work on a schedule as well, so they have to get them out the door, so they're not always adjusted to the last millimeter accurate, especially not in this price point. So expect when you get this saw that you have to do some fine-tuning. So I'm going to take you through the steps of how to set it up so that you can actually use it and get consistency out of your saw, so that, you know, everybody who has one of these could, with some minor tweaking, which might take an hour or so of your time to get this set up so that you can actually use it properly using the measurements that are on the front rather than having to use a tape measure, etc. Because it's very easy and very simple, pretty straightforward to get it to work properly. So before we start with the setup of the saw, some small handy simple tools that you need to do it, which pretty much everybody at home got it. So we need a Phillips screw, a driver for the fine adjustments of the indicators that'll show you the dimensions of the fence, etc. We need a level or something that'll help us ensure that when we do the setup everything is perfectly on the same plane, level and fitted nicely, so that you can rely on feeding your material onto the table. It's all going to be straight, level, stable and safe. We need a square of sorts so we can indicate squareness. I'll show you later why. We need a tape measure or something else that'll help you determine some basic measurements to and from the saw. We need either a spanner 10mm or a 10mm socket, ratchet and a small extension for some of the fasteners that we need to undo to adjust. And that's pretty much everything you need. So the first easy step that you can take to set it up properly is obviously your 0 and your 45 degrees. Now this is a sticker that they stuck on here, and as you can probably see on this example that we've got here, is that it's right on the edge of this radius in the metal, and it's off there by a mil or so. So the whole thing is tilted upwards slightly. So that gives you obviously a slightly inaccurate angle indication. As you can see here, it's set to 0, and if we set it to 45, or at least the setup 45 degrees, you can see it's actually pointing at 44.5. And you can use, as I've shown just now, a square to determine if it's perfectly square, particularly with this model. So if you want to use this scale specifically for your sort of for your cuts, 15, 22.5, 30, anything in between, you can't really read it off here. So if you want to buy this saw and you want to have some form of accuracy, get yourself one of these with it for $2 on Amazon. It's a little angle box. Now don't expect with this particular saw, especially also because obviously at the back there is that little play because of the way the mechanism works on this saw. Check it out in part 1 or in part 3 that's coming up. This is highly recommended in combination with this if you're going to do a lot of angled cuts. So for this exercise we're going to just test how square and how perfectly adjusted the 90 or 0 degree and 45 degree angles are. So the saw is now set at 0 or at the bump for the 0. So now we're measuring and it's 98.41. So it's about half a degree out. So we could actually adjust a little bit. 89.5. So yeah, about half a degree out. So we could adjust that a little bit. Let's put it on the 45 degree angle. So again, this is the end stop that the saw came with out the box. 45.3, so slightly more than 45 degrees. So we could adjust it slightly. So to adjust the saw, you have the two 10mm fasteners, one there, which are basically holding a bracket in place, which is just a little L-shaped bracket at the back, little metal L-shape profile, which acts as the end stops on both sides. So when you turn the mechanism, either way, you can hear it. It hits the end stops, and that's your 0 and 45 degree markers basically. So you can see by the slotted holes there's quite a lot of adjustment on it. So we're gonna fine adjust these as a first step. So let's loosen the adjustment. As you can see, you can just slide it in the groove to get your 0 degrees. So let's move it all the way out of the way. And then we get our angle box, 0 it, and then place it on the saw. And then the awkward bit is obviously to put the fastener back in place, or to place the end stop, tighten the end stop, sorry, that's the word. You probably want to use a spanner because obviously the wheel and everything else is in the way. So your 10mm spanner comes in handy here. Obviously want to make sure that when you obviously loosen it and adjust it again, you hit the 90 degree marker every time. And like I said, the mechanism has a bit of play in it. Now with that step out the way, you could adjust the arrow to make sure that obviously it's indicating more precisely what angle you're working with, so that it's actually hitting the 45 marker there, which it's just shy of. And the same goes for the 0 markers. So with a Phillips screwdriver you can loosen the arrow. And as I said, this is not going to be the most accurate scaling, so you might just want to use your angle indicator. There we go. Yeah, like I said, if it's perfectly set to 0, it won't reach the 45 because the sticker is at an angle, it's pointing upwards. So if it was pointing downwards a bit, the 45 degree would actually be more accurately positioned on the arrow there. But you have the end stop to go off there, so that's not too critical. Now we just saw adjusted. The only thing that you can't adjust with this saw is obviously making sure that the saw blade is at a 90-degree angle from the edge of the table. So that's something that you sort of have to trust the manufacturer on, because there is no adjustment on these fasteners on the mechanism underneath. I had a look. They are fixed in place, so you have to believe the manufacturer that it's at a perfectly 90-degree angle in that regards. We can measure it. Let's do that for accuracy's sakes. So to check to make sure that the saw is at a perfectly 90-degree angle from the table, we'll go off this front edge, because that's where the parallel guide, your fence, is attached to. So let's make this 0. So let's just 0 it. Oh, 0 it. 0 it. Bob on 90, so can't get any more accurate than that. So that's a good thing. We know that the saw is at a 90-degree angle to the front of the table. Now, second step is obviously making sure that we're actually getting accurate measurements out of these scales that are on here, as in your width adjustment for repeated cuts. So to make sure that, you know, when this is indicating a measurement, it's actually having that measurement as well. Now when you get this saw straight out of the box, now in my particular case, by removing the fence, you can see that the table extension, the metal piece that's attaching the two aluminium extrusion rails on either end that provide you with this sliding feature, is actually sticking out. So using a level, you can actually see it's not flush with the table. There is a gap there. If I put a light behind it, it becomes more clear. You can see the light shining through. There's a nice big gap there. So we need to adjust this, and then furthermore we need to make sure that we're getting the measurements that we're getting on the scales at the front here, because yeah, in a minute they're pointing at some random numbers. So if I were to put the fence at 10 centimeters on this scale here, strictly speaking this distance here should be 10 centimeters. At the minute it's more like 11 rather than 10, so it's not entirely usable in this state. So let's adjust it. Step 1 is undo or loosen the 4 bolts that hold the metal piece in place. Next step is, when it's all loose, move the front one so it's pointing at the edge here. So this measuring tape here is the extender indication. This marker there is 20, so 20 is the maximum cut, or the minimum cut when it's all slided inwards. So that measurement is where you should have the metal piece meet the table. So this should be your end stop basically for this front extrusion. So have this set to 20, move this piece inwards to touch the table. Use a long flush, for example a level, to make sure that the metal piece is flush against the table but also on the same level as the aluminium tabletop, as in they're on the same plane. They're absolutely perfectly horizontal, level. Yeah, it all meets up, so you have a nice flat surface to work off. The other thing as well, when this is not perfectly flush with the aluminium table, the clamp at the back of your fence isn't clamping in the groove properly, which means that if you put a little bit of force on it, the actual fence can move and cause you issues with obviously repeated cuts, precision and accuracy. So it's worthwhile taking the step, there's 4 bolts, loosen them so that this item can slide, and then all these 3 individual pieces, the metal piece and the 2 extrusions, move individually from each other. Fix them in place and then do the same on the back. It's easier if you do it in stages, because if you start screwing it all together, then it might be slightly crooked, skewered, which then makes the sliding motion very difficult. Put your fence in place. Now, because this is currently set at 20, you want, on this scale, which is the scale for the fixed table side, so if you want to cut smaller pieces, as in this area over here, you use this scale. This is also the reason why this scale has a scale starting on this side going that way and a scale going this way, because you cut from either side of the blade, this way or that way, because you can also have the fence sit here and be locked in place. You can use it there. Obviously you have to remove them and flip it around, but you can use it on that side as well, depending on your projects. This one is set at 20, so we're going to look here at 20 as well and set this to 20. We should have a perfect distance to the fence, and there we go, it to the tooth precisely. "20 centimeters. And as you can see, the fence sits comfortably on the edge here. Move this over a little bit. There's half a mil or so that it sits on the aluminium extrusion. It's not touching the cap, which could influence stability. It's not hanging over the edge like this, which then could cause like it to go skewer. So it sits on here properly, straight, so you can use accuracy, and this still allows you to reach the full width of 62 centimeters without this extender piece. You can just remove it, and then this to the saw blade is 62 centimeters. If you then turns out that you're a mil or so short or too wide, you can then take both here and just fine tune it slightly so that you're actually getting the 20 that you need. When that's done, the last step that you want to check is your fence. Your fence needs to be straight with the table. Obviously you can feed in the wood and it'll never be proper, it'll be on the skewer. So by loosening these two fasteners here, it basically loosens the front fixing arrangement of the fence with the aluminium extrusion that goes to the back, so the two can move together. So loosen these two, secure the fence in place at the front, use a square as such. Now the only thing you want to be mindful of is the screw here sticks out, so if you're using this point, it's not going to work. So you might want to do this little exercise on the aluminium table and then make sure that it's all nice and parallel, 90-degree angles. Some people like to have the fence going over a mil or so that way, so that there's no binding at the back, especially if you cut without the riving knife in place, the black blade at the back there. You don't want obviously kickback. That wood gets kicked up by the teeth going at the back there and knocks you out in the face. So some people like to set this up slightly to one side. Personal preference. You can do so you can then knock it over, and as you can see here, my fence is also slightly, there's a tiny gap there, so my fence goes slightly off to that side. Have it all set up properly, you can also see the back of the saw that initially when we did the unboxing video, I'll link it up there, you can see that this plastic piece that's grabbing or clamping the fence down at the back wasn't fully engaged into this groove. It was sitting right on the edge. So whereas now it sits right at the bottom, so it's touching the bottom of this groove and it's clamping nicely at the angle this extrusion is made at. So it's where you have maximum clamp force on the fence, and you can ensure that it's not going to move on you when you're feeding your wood through the saw. So all that's left to do now is do some test cuts to make sure that we're actually cutting what we've set up. So I've set the fence to 2.5 centimeters with the narrow add-on fitted to it. So I'm going to put the batteries in, and I've got a test piece there, and then we're going to cut it and see what comes out. And before I begin, obviously I'm doing this without the safety guard thingy in place because I want to cut some narrow strips because it's easier to measure them accurately, and for visual effects for the camera and everything I've removed it. But obviously when you watch it at home, children, don't do as I do, put the safety guard on. Now I deliberately use it without the extractor on it, and I did do some cuts before, which is why the table is somewhat used. To expect when you start using it to get these marks there, because it's painted and it won't last. But yeah, expect sawdust to appear at the top when you use it without the extractor, and then at the bottom, if we use the tripod and move it out of the way, this is the effect of sawdust coming out of the back. I did cut some fine MDF with it as well previously off camera, just to see for part 3 of this video where the dust would all go, because yeah, that'll go everywhere and everywhere, that stuff. So that'll be fun for video part number 3. But for now, let's have a look at the test pieces. I deliberately took some painted wood to see what the tear outs would be, and as you can see there's a bit here where the wood actually jumped off the table a little bit because it's a bit narrow and I don't want to get my fingers caught in the meat slicer there. So but yeah, all in all, I did cut a piece of oak with this as well, which burned nicely in terms of the burn marks on the wood. So I'd recommend, if you're doing some hardwood with this, upgrade the blade to something a bit more premium than what comes with it standard. But some softwood like this is not a problem at all. Okay, so we're back in the workshop. Let's have a look and see how wide the piece is that we just cut. I mean, give or take a tenth. Yeah, it's 2.4, 2.48. So we could do some minor tweaking, but all in all, I think pretty accurate. Obviously accuracy is only up to the millimeter, so 0.2 of a millimeter out isn't too bad, I think, for a saw in this price category. And so there you have it. A quick and simple, or at least I hope so, some quick and simple steps to follow in setting up the saw. You can apply these steps to any other brand saw as well. This obviously is tailored to this specific saw, but I mean, even a few mil might be enough for people to complain that it's not accurate. So, you know, it's just a matter of some fine-tuning. It's not the saw's fault, it's just the way that it's left the factory not fully adjusted properly. So thank you very much for watching this video. In part number 3, we will do a teardown on saw. So we'll take it to bits, have a look at the individual components, and I'll let you know how good, bad, how much value for money, etc. you'll get from this particular saw, the cheapest table saw on the internet, as in the cheapest cordless table saw, 36 volts, battery powered, 2 battery, and yeah, hopefully that'll help you take a decision as to should you buy one if you're in the market interested in one of these. For now, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, click the subscribe button there, and for part 3 or any of the other exciting videos you find on this channel, there's a video up here to consider. For now, thank you very much for watching, stay safe, and goodbye.